Brogan in June of 2014. The first employees showed up for work in Brogan's garage, and we celebrated the first employee's anniversary yesterday as we left our campus in Los Angeles yesterday afternoon. The company is operating today just outside the center of Los Angeles in a 3-acre campus. As of today, we have 68 employees. We expect by the end of the year we'll have 100. I'd like Brogan to speak a little bit about the quality of the talent and the ethos of builders who are actually building technology on a daily basis and making tremendous progress against the hyperloop architecture. Shervin, as already noted, has been associated with some of the world's most transformational companies. He originally had the discussion with Elon about this construct, and I think sharing the vision about what hyperloop can do to transform our lives, transform economies, transform labor markets, transform the experiences we have every day is something that is just truly exciting. So if I could ask Brogan to start off by answering the very simple question, what is hyperloop? And then perhaps, Shervin, we can say a little bit about what is this all going to mean to us and what's the impact as we go forward. So,
yeah, just in case, to give you guys a little background on exactly what the technology is and how it works, is we literally build a tube full scale that's going to be point to point. So you can imagine any two cities or destinations that you want to connect to, physically build a large tube between those two locations. Then you control the environment in that tube, which is to say you reduce the pressure way down to about 1/1000th of the air pressure that we feel today. This lets you send things very, very quickly through the tube with very low energy, so it becomes a very energy elegant way to move cargo and people. Part of our technology includes generally a compressor on the front of the pod that helps reduce the small amount of air that is in front of the pod and bypass it to the rear to reduce friction even more, and also the levitation mechanism to make sure that we have a smooth, a very, very efficient ride. So that's kind of the technology that we're developing. Really like to point out that we absolutely love the system architecture that Elon Musk came up with. It's a real part of the reason why this group of technical ninjas came together. And we started with that architecture, and then we built it up from the ground up from scratch. So we're not only planning on moving people, but we're also planning on moving cargo. And we have a whole product family of hyperloops that's going to serve a lot of needs.
Sure.
It's very exciting to talk about, one, the recent news of Rob Lloyd joining Hyperloop as the new CEO. It's a pretty incredible signal of the kind of talent that we've been able to assemble. If you look at the board of directors from people like Jim Messina and David Sachs, who's co-chairman, and many others who've joined, Rob joining and what he's actually accomplished in his technology career, he has already transformed the world once with Cisco and has built the grid that transports all of the bits around the world. And in the same way, this is a chance for us to build a new grid with Hyperloop technology that can actually connect the world and move atoms and bits, not only bits anymore. And that is a very transformational idea that can transform this world. And if you look at it, Hyperloop technologies can actually be one of the great innovations of this century and move people and goods around the world at speeds never before imagined. And the impact of that on our world, our global economy, on inventory financing is pretty incredible. And we can get into the details of that.
Great, so we're happy to take any questions, and yes, sir.
Hi, Simon.
There's a mic just coming so that we can all hear it.
Thanks. Simon Cooking, Irish Techniques. So we love the idea. How soon can we expect to see it popping up?
So Brogan, why don't you actually talk about the next year and what our timeframes are and what we're really trying to accomplish with the engineering and the capital and the steel you've already ordered, but what's the timeframes to build the prototype of the system?
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to point out that right now we're already up to 65 or 68 people, and we are building a lot of hardware already right now. Some of it you can see sort of on our Twitter, Instagram feed, but there's a lot more behind the scenes of that. And what we're really working on is by the end of next year to have a full-scale, full-speed prototype. So 3.3 meter diameter tube, about 3.2 kilometers long. We're going to accelerate up to over 700 miles an hour.
And stop.
And stop, that's true. Now, for this test run, it'll accelerate faster than it would for a human or cargo operation, but we do that to save costs, actually. So we're going to have that running by the end of next year. And then at that point, we're going to start really focusing on some go-to-market deployment scenarios.
Thanks. Do you have an idea of how, like, so 3 kilometers is great, how far do you think they could reach?
We're looking at routes as long as 9,300 kilometers.
So depending on the case we're discussing currently around the world, you might see a 40-kilometer run. You might see something that transforms the amount of real estate required to operate a port and moves a port inland, where the intermodal connections and trucks and trains could pick up the goods instead of at very expensive real estate. So let's say from 40 kilometers to 10,000 kilometers would be the kind of range of a Hyperloop network.
This also, just as a comment, what that means is with a network like that and a grid that is built around the world, you can truly move goods and packages and people like packets of data around the world and route them so efficiently. The other great benefit to mention is just to keep cleaning our world and making our planet a cleaner place. One of the statistics that many people don't know is that the top 15 cargo ships in the world pollute the world more than all of the cars in the world. And so this is one of those solutions that can have a great impact on our environment.
So governments are spending billions on infrastructure to build ports, to build road networks with 15, 20-year timeframes. How long should they press the pause button for? If you're one of these politicians, what should you do? How long should you give until you've proven a different model might be better?
So I think the follow-on question about timing is proving the system out in 2016 is absolutely what we will accomplish. Then picking the first 3 projects around the world that demonstrate the power, the transformational nature of Hyperloop will be a very key strategic decision for us. We have incoming requests right now from around the world, a lot from Europe, the Middle East, parts of Asia, a couple of opportunities in the United States, but I think the answer to your question is by 2020, we should be clearly demonstrating the economic advantages, the much lower operating costs that we can deliver, the material innovations that are going on right now relative to how much requirement we require. We've discovered that we require a much lower right-of-way footprint, and in some cases actually by elevating the right-of-way, we can allow for cars and animals and everything's to pass underneath the tube. All of that we expect by 2020, people could be making a decision as an alternate investment to high-speed rail, as an alternate investment to some of the other infrastructure projects that they're looking at today, and that's happening around the world.
And to add to that, one of the benefits that we look at is what we call regulatory arbitrage. And we look at governments that have budgeted billions upon billions of dollars into infrastructure projects and technologies that were designed in the 20th century. And we're trying to build the grid of the 21st and 22nd century. And so much of the world is actually held back by infrastructure that's decaying and falling apart. And then on top of that, as an analogy, you look at how Africa skipped ahead from fixed line telecommunications and went directly to mobile. There's many parts of the world that are dark today because they have no infrastructure, even 20th century infrastructure from a transportation perspective. And that's what Hyperloop will be able to bring and connect the world in that way.
Hi, my name is Nikolai. I'm from Danish National TV. I would like to, if you could elaborate a bit on the actual materials that the technology is going into the tube itself. And I'm curious about, is it point to point, or can you sort of route things along the way and change tracks?
So Rogan, go ahead.
Yeah, on the material side, I will say that we could build Hyperloop today without the technical team that we have. It would be very expensive. So a huge part of the innovations that we're doing with our amazing team of talent is to really bring the cost down so that we can deploy Hyperloop, at or cheaper than the cost that the Chinese can build high-speed rail. So we've got some really good benchmarks, and we're really working hard to bring those costs down. There's some things we probably can't share specifics of the detail, but right now we are still looking at using steel structure for the tube, which offers a lot of fantastic advantages for a lot of reasons. Really high stiffness for low cost and a few other things. And the way we utilize it is part of our innovation strategy. On the routing, there'll absolutely be T's and Y's and joints. So if you can imagine what a classic rail line would have stops along the rail, we plan on teeing off for those at speed. So any packetized pod will go directly to its destination. It won't stop in the intermediate ones.
Hi, David Gilbert from the International Business Times. So there's obviously the second Hyperloop entity out there, and they're doing things quite differently. Can I get your view on what they're doing, and is it good that there is a competing company out there doing the same thing? And secondly, they seem to think that building Hyperloop in the US isn't really feasible at the moment, and it's much more practical elsewhere in the world. Is that also your view?
So there are several endeavors right now relative to taking the Elon Musk idea, bringing it to fruition. Our company is the only company that has raised a significant amount of capital, has a permanent team, is buying steel and building infrastructure to prove out the architecture. Elon Musk's team is actually going to be helping universities compete at a very small scale competition, which Brogan and our company will be facilitating, even assisting those teams in their efforts. So we actually view that as a tremendous opportunity to have university students around the world compete, learn the constructs, and then hopefully join our team for the best of those. In terms of the other company, I think the construct of an open sourced, crowd-funded idea is interesting, but we're talking about hundreds of millions and then billions of dollars of capital that will be building critical infrastructure that a country will rely on. I believe that the kind of company that we're building today, and we're still early days, but the kind of company will be that can attract the most important construction, design, architectural firms, engineering companies, building on the architecture that Brogan is delivering. And right now, I don't believe that can be done in an open source community that can't build anything. And so there's PowerPoint, and then there's steel. And our company is buying steel and building technology today. And I think that's actually what's going to allow us to prove this concept within the next year. Yeah, will it be in the U.S.? Will it not be in the U.S.? If we can find a right-of-way and a supportive regime, a government, a state governor, a city, we would love to see an infrastructure demonstrating our capabilities in the United States. Outside the United States, we see a different view as to the value of public infrastructure. And there are projects in high-speed rail and other investment projects going on around the world that are actually stopping to pause and saying, should we look at Hyperloop? When we finish here in Ireland, Brogan's going in one direction, I'm going in another. Both of those are in Europe, and we're talking about real-life projects that are underway relative to stop. Should we think about not just a system that requires a massive right-of-way, a massive land use, that is perhaps even still an evolution of the technology that's a century old, that doesn't carry freight as well as people, and then take advantages of this revolutionary technology. So we actually are going to expect to see that. Most of those projects are outside the United States today.
I think one of the things that will help calibrate the sequencing of where Hyperloop will be built over time is getting to the Kitty Hawk moment is absolutely critical. That's a tipping point where many governments, including governments regionally and national in the U.S., will look at that as a proof point where many of the projects that are existing, including what inspired the Hyperloop idea, was the $70 billion plus budgeted in California for the high-speed rail between San Francisco and Los Angeles that Elon thought was a complete waste of capital, and came up with an elegant solution to that. So our mission, and we're driven by that mission, is to get to that Kitty Hawk moment and then help prove that it is possible to execute and replace many of those types of plans that are wasteful of citizens' dollars.
Is that moment next, the end of next year? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, our Kitty Hawk moment is demonstrating the complete system and architecture working, and then beginning to deploy that architecture for the uses that will evolve in projects around the world. And I would suggest to you, our goal as a company is to have 3 of those projects in construction between 2017 and 2020.
Emmanuel Delson from Usine Digital in France. I have a question about the model of the company, because it's a technical challenge, but you're building a new model for a manufacturing company coming from a traditional high-tech company like Cisco. How would you describe the model today with crowd design, crowd engineering, and using new pricing models?
So let's take a couple of answers to that question. First of all, I'd like Brogan to talk about how he does this very rapid design and test and then building architecture, which actually allows us to make very rapid progress on the technology. Then maybe we can talk a little bit about the business model. And remember, this is a startup, but we are delivering and developing unique intellectual property, but we would see a series of relationships or joint ventures or partnerships around the world with countries or public-private partnerships where we would maintain an interest in both the technology and the services that were delivered from Hyperloop. So on the development methodology, Brogan, how would you describe that kind of design-build mentality that you've actually designed into the campus and the existing team?
Yeah, well, so really a lot of the way we work comes out of my years at SpaceX, and a lot of the other people come from really fantastic operating. The pedigrees of our technical team is great, and they've all built hardware, so we're bringing that in-house, which really means design, development, and manufacturing and the prototype scale all happen on one campus. So the fabricators and the technicians and the engineers all learn from each other in a multi-directional learning that happens real time and late into the evenings, which is fantastic. And right now our core team is focused on 4 areas: the tube manufacturing itself, the pod of aero and thermodynamics, the levitation of the vehicle, and then the linear induction motors. These are the 4 sort of technology areas where our team is really focused on. Outside of that, Hyperloop is a lot more things. There's a lot of geotechnical and civil engineering. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of other elements. So we're starting to build partnerships to help us fill out the rest of this. So we kind of know what we are, and we're going to the best companies around the world to fill out these partnerships. And this is already starting to talk about how we build a supply chain to deliver a production system.
But you use the crowd.
Just one follow-up question.
I think it's me.
One second. Just 1 second. We're just going to finish the.
Just on the crowd, you used some crowdsourcing for design and engineering at the beginning, didn't you?
So there's another company that's just crowdsourcing.
Okay.
We intend to actually leverage the full power of the engineering community, universities, etc., in our business model, and you hear about more of that in the early part of 2016.
Okay. Just 2 small questions. I didn't understand one thing. You're a factory of Hyperloops, or you'll sell Hyperloops to a third party to export the transportation? And do you believe that you can have a price, a ticket price that is that can be more attractive than the train and plane tickets today?
So that's a very good question, and I think the answer to your question, and again, it's about the business model of our company. We'll have an intellectual property and development team that builds the architecture and the systems. We'll have an ecosystem of partnerships that are part of the deployment and construction and operations of any complex transportation system. Then we'll have projects that we engage with around the world that would be quite unique per country, depending on whether it's a public project that would be funded entirely by the public infrastructure. That's a project that will create jobs. There'll be local contractors and construction companies that will be part of building out this infrastructure. So every country will want to obtain the economic benefit of a major infrastructure project. When Brogan and I arrived last night, our taxi took us through the Dublin Port Tunnel. That's a public-private partnership where there's a fee charged to come through that tunnel, and the construction of that tunnel was to remove trucks from the streets of the city of Dublin. It's exactly one of the constructs we have in how we can transform ports with the idea of hyperloop. So think of the business model as being unique depending on the country and region in which we serve, and we'll be very flexible in building partnerships, public-private partnerships, and commercial arrangements that take advantage of the opportunities we see in Northern Europe right now, in the Middle East right now, in Russia and CIS, emerging in Asia, and obviously in China, and coming to us every day from around the world.
And on the cost, I want to say that, one thing, we're still doing the engineering development, but one thing I can assure you is that the total amount of energy used to transport either people or cargo is extremely low. And once you deploy the capital expenditures, it's really that energy that's going to drive the cost. So our early models show extremely low cost travel possibilities, as well as high speed and safe. And absolutely.
At 3 times the speed of high-speed rail, you should be at least the same or less per ticket.
Hi, Jonathan Weber from Reuters. So when you talk about transporting people at 700 miles an hour, obviously the safety issues are huge and totally unproven with this technology. And so I wonder if you're planning first to go with freight, non-people type applications to prove it, and then subsequently look at transporting people?
Yeah, I mean, obviously safety is a huge part of even why we're building Hyperloop. It's not only what it needs to be, but we think naturally the system has the possibility of being far safer than other forms of transportation. And I think we'll probably do a blog about that in the new year, really detailing the distinctions. So what was the other question?
Well, the question was whether you're going to do freight first.
I think we're very open to finding the right early routes that are the right strategic ones for our company, but certainly freight offers some simplifications in terms of the system architecture. It allows us to go faster, and we can actually take the turns at higher speeds.
Is that a yes?
We're looking at a lot of options.
So that is we're looking at all the options, and we will actually be picking the projects around the world that will most have the biggest impact in demonstrating the economic and social value of Hyperloop. That could be freight, or that might be passengers.
Thank you very much, folks. The next press conference will be at 12:30 with the French Minister for Digital Innovation. Thank you very much.